Wel, diolch yn fawr iawn gyfeillion am y croeso. Mae'n braf cael bod nôl yn Abertawe, achos yn y Neuadd o'n i'n treulio sawl diwrnod yn y ddinas fendigedig yma. Yn bennaf, wrth gwrs, yn dod i wylio'r Swans yn chwarae llythrenol lawr y hewl yn y fetch. A pan o'n i'n dod yma, nôl yn y dyddiau hynny, wrth gwrs, oedd e'n glwb bod, wel, gweld ambell i ganlyniad da o mynd â hyn, ond oedd e byth wedi gallu cystadlu go iawn felly gyda'r clybiau mawr. Yna fydd at John Toshak, wrth gwrs, yn dod yn gwybod y darnau i gyd i'w lle, ac dyrchafiad ar ôl dyrchafiad, ac yn dan i arweinyddiaeth neb yn gymerodd y clwb i le, ar frig yr adran gyntaf fel oedd i bryd hynny. Wel, sgwni, os oes na stori wleidyddol gyfatebol o'n blaenau ni dros y misoedd nesaf. Dan reolaeth Sgrin ap Iorwerth, wrth gwrs, cyrraedd y brig, felly, i Blaid Cymru ym mis Mai, ennill yr uwch gyngrei'r gwleidyddol, o bosib. Gawn ni weld, ond mae yna dipyn o waith i'w wneud cyn hynny. Ond dwi yn gwybod bod ni gyd yn edrych ymlaen at tîm top yr rheolwr, nes ymlaen y prynhawn marc y byddwn ni'n awchu i gael mynd allan yn ôl i'r cae ar ôl hynny. Ond ceio fath gwahanol, wrth gwrs, wedi bod yn mynd am ryd i dros y blynydde dwethawd i fagu teulu ar fferm deuluol yn y Ffriclwyd a gweld y plant yn tyfu gyda'r uchelgais, wrth gwrs, o ddilyn i cyndeiddio allan i'r ceir hynny ac i fewn i fyd amaeth. A dwi yn ei chyfri hi'n fraint ac yn gyfrifoldeb cael bod yn lefarydd materion gwledig Plaid Cymru. Conference, it's a privilege to stand before you today, not just as a member of the Senedd, but as someone like you, who have spent many years fighting for the communities that too often feel forgotten. Rural Wales isn't a postcard. It isn't a backdrop. It's a living, breathing part of our nation, rich in people, in culture, in communities, in resilience as well. But it's crying out for a reset and a new deal for rural Wales. For too long, it's been an afterthought for the Labour government in Wales. We used to have a development board for rural Wales. Do you remember that? Once a cornerstone of rural economic planning, now long gone. We used to have the Wales Rural Observatory as well, which did so much work on rural policy development, giving us vital insights into rural life. Gone as well under Labour. And what have we had in their place? Piecemeal policies, urban-centric legislation, and a lack of vision for the countryside, next to no strategic, joined-up thinking about the future of rural Wales. Well, Plaid Cymru says enough is enough. It's time for a rural reset, a new era of putting rural policy in the mainstream of Welsh Government. Now, according to the Bevan Foundation, rural Wales has experienced a triple squeeze caused by high costs, low incomes, and limited services. And these constraints are often not accounted for. In fact, they're sometimes even exacerbated by Welsh Government funding models and programme design and delivery. And while rural proofing notionally forms part of government approach to policy development and legislation, Audit Wales has shown that this has been ineffective and inconsistent. Crucially, rural proofing and accounting for the needs of rural communities in how funding is allocated and programmes are designed is voluntary, rather than obligatory. That's why I want to see rural proofing put on a stronger, even statutory footing, to ensure that accounting for the needs of rural communities and the challenges of service delivery in rural areas are hardwired into government thinking and decision-making. And that's why Plaid Cymru will also develop a new, tailored rural development strategy for Wales, drawing on best practice in rural development regionally, nationally and internationally, to tackle poverty and to build prosperity in our rural communities. It's time for a rural reset within Welsh Government, one that's based on respect and a deeper understanding and empathy towards the reality of life in rural Wales. Now, we can say much the same in terms of criticism when we speak about the Westminster Government as well, of course. Just look at the so-called family farm tax, the proposed changes to farm inheritance tax, a policy cooked up by a London government and nodded through by Labour MPs, including those from Wales, of course, that clearly just don't understand rural life. Now, we know that Wales isn't a nation of lavish living millionaire farmers. Our family farms operate on tight margins. They're cash poor and many of them live a hand-to-mouth existence. Welsh farmers don't have the capital to shoulder this additional burden. It'll force families to sell off land, cutting even further into their livelihoods and, of course, making their farms less viable for future generations. Yes, we need to get to grips with those multi-millionaires who intentionally buy up land for tax avoidance purposes. And there are ways of doing that. We've seen the clawback system that's used internationally, which would actually generate more money for the Treasury if that's what they're after. But our working family farms mustn't be caught in the crossfire. The economic, environmental, social and cultural damage of allowing that to happen is too high a price to pay. Now, Labour might be willing to roll over to their Labour bosses, but I won't, because this represents the biggest single threat to the future of farming in our rural communities. And Plaid Cymru, both at the Senedd and in Westminster, will continue to fight this tax with everything that we've got. Nawr, dwi'n ymwybodol iawn gyfeillion fod nifer o fewn y sector yn poeni am y newid sydd yn digwydd o'i cwmpas nhw'n enwedig o safbwynt y cynllun ffermio Cynhadledd. Ac fe welon i'r asesiad economaidd gafodd ei gyhoeddi'r wythnos diwetha oedd yn dangos, wrth gwrs, fod y cynllun ar ei newydd wedd, odi mae e'n well na'r cynllun gwreiddiol, ond mae e dal, wrth gwrs, yn dod â heriau sylweddol gydag e. Mae ambell un yn dweud, scrapiwch y cynllun yn llwyr. Taflwch i ffwrdd yr holl waith sydd wedi digwydd a'r consensws sydd wedi ddatblygu rhwng yr undebau ameth, y sector amgylcheddol ac eraill, yn enwedig o gwmpas fframwaith y cynllun. Ar ôl blynyddoedd o ansicrwydd ac ansefydlogrwydd i ffermwyr, gyda neb i bob pwrpas yn gallu cynllunio ymlaen a'r sector i raddau mewn rhyw fath o stasis yn rhy hir o lawer, ond i ni wir eisiau mynd yr holl ffordd nôl i'r cychwyn a chychwyn eto. A chi'n gwybod beth, dyw'r cynllun ddim yn berffaith, a dwi wedi galw ar y Llywodraeth i fod yn hyblyg ac i fod yn barod i esblygu'r cynllun, i newid y cynllun a diwygio'r cynllun wrth fynd yn ei flaen. Os mae yna oblygiadau yn dod yn sgil yr hyn sydd ar y bwrdd ar hyn o bryd, yn benna y lefelau incwm i'r sector, wrth gwrs, a mae angen felly nawr ffocysu ar gau y bwlch incwm yna sydd wedi amlygu. A dyna, wrth gwrs, lle mae'r toriadau i'r siar o ariannu amaethyddol sydd yn dod i Gymru o Lywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig yn brifo ni nawr yn fwy nag erioed. Not a penny less, wrth gwrs, oedd addewid y cydwadwyr, os gofiwch chi ar ariannu amaethyddol ar ôl Brexit. Cyn iddyn nhw wedyn, wrth gwrs, adael ffermwyr Cymru bron i £250 o bunnau yn glotach. Ac mae Llafur, wrth gwrs, wedi mynd gam ymhellach wrth iddyn nhw ddefnyddio fformula Barnett ar gyfer cyllid amaethyddol. Felly, siar o 5% fyddwn ni'n cael o hyn ymlaen yn lle'r 9.4% i ni wedi cael yn y gorffennol. Ac mi fydde adfer y lefel ariannu yna yn mynd ymhell i gau y bwlch incwm sydd wedi cael ei amlygu yn yr asesiad economaidd sy'n dod o'r cynllun ffermio Cynhadledd. Nawr, mae'n ansicrwydd ariannu arall hefyd, wrth gwrs, pan o'n i'n rhan o'r Undeb Ewropeaidd, mi oedd yna sicrwydd 7 mlynedd o ariannu o dan y polisi ameth cyffredin. Bellach, mae'r sector yn gorfod mynd o fis, neu o 12 mis i 12 mis. Wel, sut yn y byd allwch chi gynllunio busnes wrth straffaglu yn ariannol o flwyddyn i flwyddyn? Dyna pam y gallai gadarnhau y bydd Llywodraeth Plaid Cymru ar ôl mis Mai yn rhoi sicrwydd ariannu amaethyddol am gyfnod cyfan y Senedd nesaf. Mi fyddwn ni yn ymrwymo i gylch ariannu hir dymor mwyn rhoi hyder i ffermwyr Cymru fydd soddi yn ei busnesau am y tymor hir. And I have to say, there is an irony, isn't there, in seeing the Tories and Reform going against both the wishes of the farming unions and the environmental organisations in wanting to rip up the sustainable farming scheme and start again. It's ironic, of course, because those who supported Brexit, who spent their time telling us that Brexit would be good for this country, are now complaining about the consequences of Brexit. None of this would be happening if it wasn't for Brexit. Now, the people of Wales may have listened to them then, but I can bet you that they'll think twice about listening to those people once more. But there we are. That's Reform and the Tories for you, isn't it? Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Quarrelling all the time, but practically indistinguishable these days. Always looking for an argument, never looking for an answer. Always making a noise, but never making a difference. Nawr, gweitha'r holl heriau sy'n wynebu'r sector ac gwlad y dyddiau yma, mae rhaid i ni gofio fod y sector fwyd, fel i ni wedi clywed yn y drafodaeth flaenorol, yn stori newyddion da. Ond mi allai fod lawer iawn yn well, wrth gwrs. Mae'r gadwyn gyflenwi bwyd a diod yng Nghymru yn cynrychioli bron i 250,000 o swyddi yng Nghymru, 17% o holl swyddi economi Cymru. Ond ar yr un pryd, i ni yn gwybod y bydd newid hinsawdd a tywydd eithafol yn tarfu fwy ar ein cyflenwad bwyd ni, a gyda, enghraifft, hanner yr holl ffrwythau a llysiau sy'n cael eu bwyta yn y wlad yma'n dod o dramor, i ni yn rhy ddibynnol ar fewnforion wrth gwrs, ond mae yna risg enfawr wedyn yn y byd cynyddol ansefydlog sydd ohoni, y bydd y ffynonellau hynny yn ein gwasanaethu ni cystal yn y dyfodol. Ychwanegwch chi hefyd system gyflenwi bwyd hynod ganolog, hynny yw centralised, sy'n cael ei ddomiwnyddu galon llaw o archfarchnadoedd mawr sydd rhyngddyn nhw yn cyflenwi 95% o holl fwyd y Deyrnas Unedig, ac i chi wedyn yn dechrau gweld bod angen mynd ati i gryfhau gwtnwch bwyd yma yng Nghymru. Now, we need to be building a resilient, sustainable food system for Wales, moving away from over-reliance on imported produce and centralised supply chains to fostering homegrown and diversified food systems. We need to establish a whole society approach where every layer, from national policymakers to local communities, play a part in safeguarding food supplies. And as has just been discussed in the motion before us a moment ago, food in our schools is a big part of that. Be it developing the right food habits amongst our children through improved literacy, or increasing, of course, the Welsh produce put on their school dinner plates. But that means investing in local infrastructure, in community-led projects, and education initiatives that build long-term resilience and reduces our dependency on volatile global markets. Now, we also have a job of work to do on the animal health and welfare front as well, not just in relation to farming, of course, and the significant challenges bovine TB, and now, of course, blue tongue as well pose the sector. There's a broader piece of work to be done too. Work on introducing regulations for animal welfare establishments has already started, and Plaid Cymru wants to see that work through, because we want to make sure that the welfare of animals in sanctuaries, rescue and rehoming centres is protected from substandard levels of care sometimes, and of course from rogue operators. But we also need to consider our approach to responsible dog ownership. Now, the number of people hospitalised because of dog bites has actually doubled in the last 10 years, and we're all, I'm sure, aware of some of the horrific stories and incidents that have been experienced in recent times. And they tell us more needs to be done. It's 10 years also, of course, since the dog breeding regulations were introduced. And all of this is only as effective as the enforcement that sits behind it. Now, we know that time and resources won't allow Plaid Cymru to do everything that we wish to do if we find ourselves in government. But I do look forward to working with stakeholders across the piece to prioritise the actions that we need to take so that we become the animal-friendly nation that we all want Wales to be. Odi, mae tîm Plaid Cymru yn barod am un o'r gemau pwysica yn ein hanes ni. Os ydrychwch chi ar y tabl, i ni ar y brig, ond boes bach mae'n agos. Ac os ydyn ni am sicrhau'r fuddugoliaeth, yna mi fyddwn ni angen chwarae gêm yn bywydau dros y misoedd nesaf. Let's be clear, Conference. Labour, as we know, has failed rural Wales. After 26 years in power, they've centralised services, they've underfunded provision, and they've neglected the economic potential of our countryside. And now with the UK Labour government in Westminster as well, we're seeing much the same. Cuts to farm funding, an incoherent farm tax policy, and a rural strategy that's all talk and little action. Plaid Cymru truly understands rural Wales because we live there, we work there, and we listen. Now, my ambition is that my children can look forward to living and working in the rural communities that raised them. And this isn't just about farming, it's about fairness. It's about the right to live, work, and thrive in the communities that we call home. It's about a future where rural Wales isn't left behind, but leads the way. And Plaid Cymru is ready to deliver that future. So let's reset the rural agenda. Let's rebuild our communities. And let's reclaim our countryside. Diolch yn fawr iawn.